Welcome, everybody. If you haven't dropped your name and location, go ahead and do that, please. So let me start with a situation I think a lot of you will recognize. So there's a senior product manager with 20 plus experience, 20 plus years of experience shipping products at Microsoft and Amazon. She came to me with a frustration. So while at Amazon, a feature request that was completely validated wasn't getting approved. In fact, it was being blocked by her manager. The user surveys confirmed it was important. 600 upvotes in their internal feature request page. The engineering team said it was feasible. It was a low lift, high value feature that was going to benefit Amazonians and their AWS clients. But the manager still blocked it for multiple sprints. Why, though? The data were great, the feasibility was solid, and still none of her logical arguments were working. You see, the senior product manager was working on an internal platform to make meetings more efficient, and a feature request of multilingual support, which had the most upvotes from users, was more beneficial to the external meetings, not the internal ones. Their product was more of a headquarters-centric view at the time, while the features, though, were used for a worldwide audience. And her manager was solely focused on internal impact. He had never been rewarded for customer-facing work. His mental model of success, of what it looked like, did not have room for her feature or his perceived risk of diversion from the internal-facing roadmap. And that's not an unusual story. That is the life of product managers in most organizations. It wasn't her logic that failed her. She was pitching the right feature, but to the wrong version of her manager, the one that publicly espoused the customer obsession values that Amazon has, but not the real version of her manager that actually determined his day-to-day decisions. So today we're going to uncover what really drives stakeholders and shift from logical to psychological. Now, most product managers don't realize this about the stakeholder meetings. The decision is usually made before you even walk in. And it's not because people are irrational. It's actually the opposite. Everyone in that room is completely rational. They're just optimizing for things that aren't on the agenda. They're optimizing for their career, their team's budget, their relationship with their boss, their fear of being the one who approved that thing that one time that failed and seeing that come back again. But none of that appears on the invite to the meeting, but all of it is actually running the meeting. You see, the PMs that consistently win rooms aren't necessarily better at logic. So they might come in with very good decks, great presentations, clean data, but something's already been decided at the time. See, what actually decides the room is the hidden incentive system. So all of those career elements, making sure that we're not blamed if something goes wrong or getting credit when things go right, things that drive our personalities and our career journeys. See, everybody that we encounter is on a journey of their own. We are, our colleagues are, we're all trying to move ahead and create success for ourselves. And those elements, while they are not necessarily apparent on the surface, are what drives a lot of our emotional decision making. So in the next 30 minutes, I'm going to give you a framework to be able to break this down and discover the hidden incentive system that's driving a lot of these decisions that are happening. We're going to cover 3 archetypes that cover almost every stakeholder you're going to face. We're going to get 3 diagnostic questions that you can answer before each meeting, not during it, and then a way to pressure test your read with AI the night before so that you're ready to go for that high stakes pitch. Okay, so quick elements in 30 minutes. Let's get to the framework. Now, I've asked this question in almost every coaching session I've had that I've run over the past several years. What would your boss's boss have to do to get fired? What would they have had not do to get a promotion? So that's going to tell you a lot about what's actually happening behind the scenes. Because what we want to figure out is what's the job that the stakeholder has on paper. So those are going to be the OKRs, the things that their job description says that they're supposed to be responsible for. But then there's an underlying job about what really matters to them. And we've got to figure out that. And it's not going to be the core values of the company. It's going to be the elements that are hidden behind what they need to do. And these are going to be the things that they care about most They're going to drive a lot of their time, a lot of their attention, and they're also going to be changing the way that they look at decisions based upon the emotion that drives it. So there's three different archetypes that we often encounter. There's the risk shield, the credit catcher, and the tribal guardian. So the risk shield, this is somebody that's been burned before, and you might encounter them when they're asking questions that seem like diligence. So they want to ask for more analysis. They want to be hesitant around moving forward with something. They want to ask a whole lot of questions to make sure that you know your stuff. And see, the thing is, they've probably been burned with a mistake that they've been blamed for in the past, and they don't want to let that happen again. So their questions sound like due diligence, but really it's about that internal fear. And oftentimes they're not actually even acknowledging that's what's happening, but that's just their personality now. So what are you going to do about it? You've got to show that not deciding on a thing to move forward is actually riskier than taking the decision to move forward. You've got to provide them enough sense of security and that move it away from their biggest concerns and then be able to move forward. Maybe that's a milestone approach to where you're going to take small steps rather than something a large leap. Or maybe you have to avoid something that is going to be their biggest concern, like uptime or downtime of a system or something core. So we'll go through some examples that about each one of these archetypes as well. So the second one is the credit catcher. You might be familiar with this person because they like to talk a lot in the meetings that you have. And you may see them wanting to talk about their own feature ideas. They want to get something on the table that gets adopted so that they have the element to say, hey, I was the one that helped shape this. So they want to also be the one that you run everything past. So they're going to be, if you don't run it past them, they're going to be the ones that are going to say, I told you so ahead of time, or why didn't you involve me? Now, see, what's happening here is they often ask a lot of questions that sound strategic, like how is this going to integrate with our OKRs? But really it's about the pride and then that career journey that we talked about. So the risk shield is looking at trying to avoid a negative impact on their career, where the credit catcher is trying to take something that's going to be moving them forward and see if they can make your win their win as well. What you don't want to do is necessarily avoid them entirely, because oftentimes these people are charismatic. They have a lot of political power, and they could help be a great advocate for your product, for your feature idea, whatever the initiative is. So you want to try to take advantage of that when it's available. So you're going to frame the pitch to be able to get so that they get a moment involved in it as well, and they can get a little bit of that credit, but you still get the thing that you want to be moving forward with too. And then lastly is the tribal guardian. What they have is they have maybe a kingdom that they're trying to protect. So they're going to raise concerns that about overlapping with something that, oh, my team is already doing this. And so they're not necessarily trying to move forward or trying to prevent moving backwards. What they're trying to say is, I've got my political power, I've got my budget, I've got my team size, whatever thing that matters most to them, and that your thing that comes in, any change can threaten their existence or their value, their worth. So you see this a lot in larger organizations that have a little bit of that government type of feel, to where once you get a budget, you want to use all of it, because then you can otherwise you can't make the argument for the same budget going forward. And so change is actually a threat to a lot of the things that they have in their institution. So what you want to make sure of is that you're going to show that there's going to be no overlap, or if there is overlap or something that they have, they get a chance to be a participant in it, and that they're not threatened by what you're providing. Okay, so how do you go out and determine which one of these archetypes are you dealing with? And now each of these archetypes are not always clear. Some people, when I think back about different stakeholders that I've dealt with and failed in dealing with, and where this came from, is some of them were strongly in one category or another, but the more difficult ones can sometimes appear as one archetype or another, but usually people lean one way. And so what we're going to try to do is figure out where do they stand, and then also what are going to be the things that matter to them most. So when you think about your last performance review, if you think about your last meeting, there's some element under the surface that everybody's actually looking at through a different lens. So you may have your performance data for your performance review, but your stakeholder your boss or your boss's boss or somebody else might be looking at that same data about your performance through a different lens than you would. And so what we're going to try to figure out is what is below the surface on with everybody. What are the things that they're most worried about, the things that are going to drive them? And so I mentioned that question of what would get this person fired. I usually think about it as what would your boss's boss have to do? And so that's going to then determine the incentive system for your whole organization. That's what I want to help make product managers understand, that they could build features that then help their organization move forward based upon these hidden incentives that are there. But you can also use that same technique for individuals. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to ask that question, but not to them. We're going to ask it of ourselves, because we're not trying to get anybody fired, but we do want to understand what's going to drive them, what's going to map out their fear that's underlying a lot of their actions. So another way to look at this is, where do they spend most of their time? So everybody has a job description, but you might see somebody spends a lot of time in one area. So if it's a head of sales, maybe they are spending a lot of time micromanaging how many appointments get made with customers. Maybe they're micromanaging the entries of opportunities in the Salesforce. Now, you as product managers probably don't have to deal with those things, but if you can see where they're spending their time, it also indicates like what they're caring about most. And so what you need to do is flip that and talk about how some of your ideas end up appealing to the thing that they care about most. And so that's going to move them from blocker to ally of your idea. Second question is the opposite of that. So what would get this person promoted? What do you see happening in their career journey that's going to take them forward? What brand are they trying to establish for themselves? If you think through the personality of them as a human and not them as their title or role, what is it that they want to be known for? And so you might be thinking about, where are they happy with where they are? Or are they trying to get to the next level? That can help you indicate, is this person a tribal guardian or are they a credit catcher? A tribal guardian wants to protect and not necessarily move, but they want to hoard resources if they can, whereas the credit catcher is always looking forward to the next thing. So you can look at, like, where are they trying to go with their type of career? And then lastly, this is the one that's going to help you flip things around and really build advocacy in the meeting, is what question, if I ask this in the meeting of each one of these stakeholders, is going to make them feel included. See, we want to bring people into the conversation that we have. We want to bring them into the idea, into whatever we're proposing. We're not pitching something to them. We want to bring them in to where it's pitching something with them. So we want them to feel like the meeting is going their way from the very beginning, almost like they've decided on these elements, and there are some extra tricks that can make this happen even before we pitch out a question. So the key thing that I want you to take away is a tactic that you probably heard before, but something that I always avoided. So I resisted this for years. I was too logical. I thought that if I had the right answer and presented it clearly, that people would agree with my brilliance and follow along. I'd spend weeks on analysis. The deck, the presentation would be airtight. The business case was clean, clear ROI. But then when I was presenting it, something would erupt in the room out of nowhere and it would catch me off guard. Or the room would go completely quiet and I couldn't figure out why. Or something was like, hey, we'll table this for discussion for later. And I couldn't figure out what was going on. But as I reflected on this even years later and tried to work on it, I realized that the logic was never the problem. What I hadn't accounted for was that some people walk into meetings ready to perform. If you think about those three archetypes, they have something that they want to share that comes from that emotion that they're bringing in, whether that's fear or some sort of desire or protection. They want to be able to be the one that maybe spotted a flaw. They want to show that they can ask sharp questions. Maybe they want to reframe something. And if you haven't given these people a venue to do that before, your meeting becomes that venue. And so once that starts, you don't have a decision meeting anymore. You have a theatrical performance and you're no longer the director of that. So what we're going to do is you're going to have the meeting before the meeting. So we go from walking in with a logical approach and just hoping that something goes well to now making sure that before any pitch that you have, you're going to go up to each stakeholder individually. You're going to share with them, hey, I'm working on something. I'd love to get your perspective on it. You're going to dig into anything that might sound like a concern. Then you're going to ask them for advice. What would you do if you were me in this situation? And you're going to listen. You're going to say almost nothing. You're going to ask questions other than that. You're not going to try to defend your idea unless they ask you a question about how you've thought through it. But you want to exhaust them of any potential worries. You want to exhaust them of any performance that they might have in the meeting. And by asking them for advice at the same time, so you're pulling things out of them so that they take out some of the emotion that they have built up, you're then bringing in some of their advice that you can use to ask that question of them to make them feel included later too. And they become an advocate for what you're building. And yes, it does take a lot more time up front, but it's going to lead to an enormous time savings in the conference room. I can tell you about one situation. I was trying to do a business model redesign and repositioning of a new product. And so I was coming in more as a consultant to this group. They'd seen me do good work on my product portfolio. And I said, hey, can you help us with this one that we're moving forward on? So I'm in a room of, I think it was 8 to 10 executives. And these are all high level people at this company. And so they're saying, okay, we want to try to move this forward. But what I did beforehand was I met with each one individually to try to figure out what is the sense of this room? Why is this not working before? They've been working on this thing for a couple of years now, and it's just not moving forward. We're having disagreements. So I let every single executive exhaust themselves as they talk to me. And then I shaped the agenda. I shaped the pitch that they were working on with their insights. And so when I came into the room, I could look everybody in the eye and be able to point to something that named that person. Hey, David said this. Sonam said this. And I love this idea from Tara. So you name the person, you look at them with eye contact, and you bring them in, and they're going to nod their head already at the idea. So now they feel part of it. And we have all the performance expectations just out of the room. Typically, when you get that many executives in a room, they all love to bicker. They all love to grandstand. Well, we took all that out with the meeting before the meeting. So what does it look like if you're going to read a stakeholder? And oftentimes these are people not just in your product management group, right? If you're a product manager that's here, this applies to everybody as well. But let's take a look at some of the other types of stakeholders that might be out there. VP of sales. In this case, you've done your questioning and figure out that this person is trying to advance and they're a credit catcher type of archetype, okay? And you look at then what are the things that they care about most? What would get them fired? Well, for them, it's if they're not attaining their quota. It's not about retention. So you know that a VP of sales might be in charge of both new sales and retention. In this case, they only want to care about quota attainment. And so that's what we dug into because we look where they spend their time. All right. And so then we're going to make a message that says this is going to give your team a closing argument that they don't have yet. So we're going to make a message in our pitch that appeals to the fear and the archetype that they have yet. They get to win, and it hits the metric that they care about most. Let's look at the engineering one. Maybe they're a risk shield, right? They're worried because they've been burned with things going badly before about product managers being gunslingers and putting out new features. So maybe they're worried about technical debt risk, that if we introduce something big and new, and we are going to say, we scoped this so it doesn't touch the core payment stack where they're most worried. So we help them avoid the risk. And then maybe the chief marketing officer says they're the tribal guardian. They want to maintain and own something. And in this case, it's not necessarily the people, it's the responsibility of customer messaging. And of course, our domain as product managers is we have an element of positioning and messaging. So we might say something like, we want marketing to lead the story and lead this rollout. Here's the angle that we've been thinking about, but we want you to own it. Right, so then it gives them that credit. You're going to take the same feature idea, same product idea, whatever it is, and you're going to shape the message based upon what you've dug into with a meeting before the meeting, by asking these questions ahead of time, by labeling with the archetype. And this is what influential PMs do, is that we're not just logical. Actually, we can be less logical now, and we become psychological. This is how we're going to influence now that we've got a core foundation. All right, so if you have an a stakeholder situation in mind, I want you to put that, at least bring it up in your head, maybe write it down. And if you want to share it later, we can also address it and talk about that situation. Because I know I've been through a lot of different tough stakeholder pitches or meetings or something where something went wrong and I couldn't quite diagnose it. Now I've been through enough to be able to help be able to do that much faster. So think about a real pitch. Maybe it's a proposal that's coming up. Maybe it's one that you recently had as well. And I want you to think about it and then get out some paper or open up a notepad, a new markdown file, since that's what we're using all these days. And then I want you to write down maybe 2 to 3 stakeholders that are going to be in that conversation. So write down their names, write down their roles. And then what we're going to do is we're going to ask the 3 diagnostic questions. What were they again? So what would this person have to do to be fired? What would get them fired? We're not actually going to get anybody fired here, but we're going to think about it. What would help get them promoted? What are they angling for? What's their brand? What can we assist with that in their career journey? And then lastly, what question could I ask in the meeting to make them feel included? That's going to pull on those strings as well. So I'm going to answer those questions. And then you're going to rewrite your message for each one of them. This is going to be a simple sentence. Just like we showed on the last slide, what are going to be some examples to say, how can I appeal to this person's desire for more? How can I appeal to this person's fear of something going wrong, that we've done our homework, whatever it might be, that to make them feel included. And you can drop it in. You can drop it in the chat, but also drop it into the meeting at different points to where it makes sense. It doesn't have to be your opening. Sometimes you may want to clear the air right away and talk about, hey, I understood that there were some concerns and I want to make sure we address them before we get into too much. And you can name the person by name, look at them with eye contact, and mention the message that you've now created for them. And they go from crossing their arms to leaning in and nodding. Right now, it shows that, hey, this person was a part of helping shape this idea, and they're proud of that as well. So think through this. And if you have any troubles, again, identifying what's going to get them fired, think about where they spend most of their time, not just what it looks like on the surface of the OKRs, but where do they have most of their time? If they were to say, oh, I've been really busy doing X, what is that? And that's going to show where they care about most. Okay, so think about where this has happened in the past or something that you've got in the future and jot these things down. And then if you want, you can share them in the chat or we could with any questions that you have too. Now, while you're doing that, I also want to share with you and provide something, a free bonus for being here. And then people at home as well, if you're watching the replay on this, you get a chance to take what I've got here in this content as well as a lot more. And I've built it into basically a long prompt. It's also a skill that you can download. I use these skills in Claude, but I'm going to give you the prompt about how you can prepare for an adversarial stakeholder, somebody that's not easy to work with. So you're going to take the full prompt. I'll give you a QR code here as well that you can scan, or you go to this. I'm going to pull up the actual prompt in a second to show you. I'll put it in the chat right now so you can go to it if you want. Thank you. And then David, I'll address your question on the pre-meetings in a moment too. Okay, so the prompt is all there. And then what you're going to do is paste it in. So you're going to say, hey, act as this kind of archetype. And it has all the information on those archetypes as well. Tell the LLM about where you're working, what the situation is, any extra stuff, what are your goals that you're trying to work on? And then what is like your career concern, right? What is it that you think that, or actually this is the stakeholders, not just your own, right? So if you're identifying the stakeholder, what is their career concern about what's going to get them fired or what's going to help them with their career? And then you're going to get some advice from this stakeholder about objections that they might be raising in the meeting. What's going to change their mind? And so we're going to just do a little bit of role play with the AI as well. So you want to make sure that you're going to go past the generic when we talk about their real career concern, right? It's not the superficial thing that everybody has, but really, what do we think that their real fear is? And then make sure that's what you could put in. The more specific you can get, the better. And then you'll run this through and it'll give you multiple objections to work on. So let me share what this looks like real quick. Change my screen over. So you're going to take this type of prompt here. So if you want just the prompt, I've got this written out. You just hit copy in this GitHub. If you want the full skill to be able to load in, it has that as well. So we're going to take that prompt, we're going to copy it. You go into whatever ChatGPT or Claude and you paste it in and you put in all your context here. And then it has all of the way that I coach people on this already built in. Okay. So it's all ready to go as if you were to be asking me this kind of question as well. And then if you want to look at more skills, there's plenty out there. So within this repository, which you have the link to now, you can go through and load up all these skills into Claude if you want to. These are all just free that you can use. And they have all kinds of different categories. So strategic thinking, building a business, stakeholder customer influence. So the adversarial stakeholder prep is here. Career growth. I help coach a lot of people on career transitions as well. And so all this stuff can be loaded in, or you could use the individual prompts as is as well. All right, so let me change the screen back. Okay, we're nearing the end. So let me get to just a couple elements. So if you're wanting to do more of these types of things, I know this is a very quick, short lesson. It's part of one of our bigger modules that we have in the influential PM course that's on Maven. Strategy, stakeholder significance. This is module 5, where we're covering just a small topic of how you're going to take a stakeholder demand and turn it into a strategic win. And by being here as a guest of the lightning lesson, you get $300 off as well if you use the code LL300 right there. I'll paste the link for that one in the chat as well. And then I will get to your questions too. Okay, so first question while you're thinking of others, David had a question around the pre-meetings tend to take a lot of time and effort. How to do this efficiently? Absolutely. It's also difficult to schedule sometimes. You want to think about, can I afford to take an extra week to make sure that this is a success? So the higher level of consequence of the meeting determines how much more research or prep time that you want to be doing. So if it's something that is a two-way door type of decision, we could go back and forth on it, then you don't need to necessarily do it. But this is something pivotal for you or for your product or for your company, you want to take the time to do. So what I do is I have an agenda that says, I'm going to give you everything ahead of time, basically a pre-read. Nobody reads a document, but you send them the document anyways. You give them a summary and say, hey, I'd love to just walk it through with you as to what we're going to cover and get your perspective on it so that you don't have to read through all of the pre-read materials. And they're going to actually be thankful. They're like, okay, somebody can brief me in 20 minutes on this versus me having to read an hour-long worth of documents and me think it through, because they're not going to read it. So they're going to be more accepting of your invite. And then what we're going to talk about is like, oh, let's just go through the agenda of what the meeting's going to be about and the concepts and just ask them, is this covering the elements that you think we should? You don't even have to do the pitch, right? You're not pitching to them ahead of time. You're asking them about shaping the things that we're going to talk about, right? And so then they might ask questions that then dig in here or there. And you're just, one, letting them talk, right? So you want to save time in the meeting by asking them questions. You're not defending anything unless they ask. And then you're going to go through and then you're going to do the same thing over and over again. Sometimes if you can't get access to certain people ahead of time, you might ask them to say, who else do you think I should talk to? And would you mind introducing me if I don't know them that well? So then I use that meeting to then parlay into the next one using the credibility of the first stakeholder that I was talking to. So I would say 30 minutes because these people are going to be low on time and you're going to try to stack them into 1 week. So you're going to take, hey, I tell everybody we're going to do a set of preparations and you want to try to get people's input and then put 30 minutes on their calendar throughout this whole week. And it happens to be the week before that presentation. Okay, if you have more questions about it, let me know. Okay, so the course curriculum, yeah, if you click on that link above, it should take you to the course. And in that, you're going to see then a syllabus button, show the full syllabus, and it'll go through what are all the different 8 classes that are in that in that course. Okay, I know we're at time here, so I will stick around for a few more minutes if anybody has questions or situations that we want to run through, and you can feel free to come off mute and be able to talk about it, ask it, or you can put it into the chat as well, like some of you already have. All right. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for joining. And if you do have questions, you can reach out to me at brennan@unabatedproducts.com. Oh, you got another question there, David? Yeah, and if you have to leave, I appreciate you joining. How can the PM do efficient market research for roadmap enhancement? Okay, that is a much bigger topic than what we have here. But yeah, in one of the course modules is about market research, and I will give you one tip on that. Market research is not what you typically think of, the MBA style, hiring a management consultant to come in and do an analysis of the whole market. It starts with knowing one person by name that has an acute problem that's urgent and they're willing to pay for. Yeah, I just want you to, can you tell me one person by name that you've talked to that you can confirm has this problem? Once we do that, then we have our empathy, we have an inkling of reality, and we can then determine, is this person representative of a larger market? Once we do that, now we have clues as to the characteristics that we need to research, what kinds of people that fit into this category, and then we can look to see what are the existing solutions that are out there, competitors, those kinds of dynamics, trends, regulatory elements. So we start first with just talking to humans and making sure that you can name one person. I can't tell you how many times I've come across founders that I advise, executives, product managers that can't tell me the name of a real person that has this problem that they're spending all their time trying to solve for this idea, this problem that they've never actually validated with just one human. Start there. And if you want to know more about market research, the right kind, you can let me know. Can synthetic personas via AI fit the consumer? I talk to a lot of design leaders that do user research about this stuff a lot. My perspective is that it can give you a lot of different scenarios that you want to investigate, but it should never give you confirmation. It should never give you confirmation that your assumptions were right, because the LLMs are they're sycophantic, right? They want to please us in the way that they approach it, especially certain ones that you use. I moved away from ChatGPT because it was too positive. And I moved all my work over to Claude. And I think a lot of people have done that recently too, because they're going to try to fit some certain things in there. Now, can you uncover things that you hadn't thought of with synthetic personas? Absolutely. That's what we're doing here with this adversarial stakeholder prompt. It gives us more things to think about. But if the prompt tells you, hey, you're doing a great job, I've got no objections, then you shouldn't listen to it. And that's what happens a lot of times with our prompting style and the LLMs that are out there. So you can use it as part of your research, but not all the way. Good questions so far, even if they're not necessarily on track with this topic. So David, thank you for that. All right. All right. If we have no more, then thank you for joining. I appreciate you. And reach out to me if you have more questions. You can also find me on LinkedIn. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.